Hello, everyone, and welcome to this brand new edition of Successful Posturologists. And I'm here with my good friend Dylan Fisher, who I've known quite actually for a few years. Hi, Dylan. How are you?
I'm good, Matt. How you doing?
I'm super, super happy to be doing this with you because you've been a really big proponent of incorporating posturology in your practice. And the whole purpose of the podcast is to help people like you and I see how they could make it fit in their world outside of the fact that they think it's really cool. So you've got a pretty amazing background as well. If maybe you want to start by telling people who you are, your background, and what got you into posturology.
I think it was about 2014. So I used to be a paramedic actually here in London, and I'd had a shoulder injury, and I just by chance, a guy that I knew, Jeremy, he had just done the training with you, and I saw all these trainers at the Good Life I went to with the little magnet next to their eye, the Band-Aid, and I just had to know more about what it was, and it was like a synchronicity, right? Because I was off work dealing with a shoulder injury. I had always had issues in my right hip and my right knee playing hockey my entire life. And I just had that little light bulb moment like, oh, this makes so much sense. I got to go through this and try it. So the rest is history. I did it with Jer. I would say within 6 weeks of wearing the insoles and doing the eye work. At the time, I was having some pretty severe elbow tendonitis, shoulder pain, some hip issues, and like that, it was gone. So I was a believer at that point. And I'd always wanted to do it because my background was in personal training, but I switched over in about 2019, 2018. I got out of EMS, got into natural health, was working at a clinic for a mentor of mine, and got more into herbal medicine, homeopathy, things like that. Um, I don't know where the inspiration came from, but last year I just thought I got to jump in and do this with you and reconnect because we'd been chatting for a few years, and I just think it's. I guess what I'll say is I practice autonomic response testing, which is ART, Dr. Klinghardt from Germany, and so it's a highly advanced form of muscle testing that we use. And with Dr. Klinghardt, he's boiled down pretty much all illnesses into 7 factors, right? So we've got toxicity, infection, food sensitivities, emotional, psychological, etc. But one of the 7 factors is structural. So, if somebody's got a major structural issue, whether it be the bite, the neck, leg length discrepancy, etc., that is one of the 7 factors that can block that person from healing. And so I thought, what better system to incorporate so I don't have to send people elsewhere to chiro, osteo, whatever. I can do posturology and I can work on this. And so that's how I've integrated it, right? For the most part, it's my existing clients that I'm using it with. But I'm starting to draw people in that are not my existing clients who are specifically interested in posturology. So that's kind of my story.
And how many years have you been in clinical work in terms of when you started with your mentor?
If memory serves me, it was about 2019. So I had suffered a pretty severe shoulder injury in 2017,
Gotcha. So
and
that all
that
started 2017, the shoulder injury. So it's about 10 years. That's it. So 10
yeah,
years
give or take, give or
of
take.
evolution where I love Dr. Klinghart's work. Obviously, we've spoken about this, you and I, a lot. I find he's one of those guys that has been able to put into a formula. Here we go. Just about any and everything that's about healing into a system. And I like systems. I like to have an orientation. And I find with a lot of what he's speaking of, a lot of other people speak about it, but they have a hard time positioning where things go. And so some people are all about energy medicine, but like that's all they do. And then some people would be into more, structural, but then they won't look at toxicity, right? Or as you said, infection. And so first off, so he's a medical doctor, which I think, it can be important for people to appreciate in terms of credibility. And he's a German medical doctor, and Germany is probably the number one country in the world for medicine outside of even like the work that he does. But then it happens to be that he's a German doctor, and yeah, so the notion of structure, and he actually positions it at the very right. He has a pyramid of what's to be managed first and second and third, and he actually puts structure at the very bottom. So if you can give me, you were doing health work before posturology, you've integrated it based on Klinghart's model. What kind of issues have you been able to maybe resolve more easily since integrating posturology as a structural approach in terms of the bigger picture of what you've been working on the whole time?
Yeah, so with Dr. K's pyramid, as you described, there's two different models they use or two diagrams, but the physical body is at the base of the pyramid. And so the physical body is generally where symptoms show up. And so obviously the structure is part of the physical body. And so, we know most illnesses originate in the higher levels in the psyche and things like that. But if you've got a severe structural, I think of people that have extreme forward head posture and they can't take a deep breath, or extreme chronic pain, so their nervous system is always jacked up in a sympathetic state. You can do all the higher level healing, but if that's what's holding you back, once we address that, then we can allow healing to happen. So basically what we do, or what I do in ART, is I can now, with my posturology background, I can visualize it and see people who are clearly out of balance on the physical level. If somebody's in a lot of pain, right, or they've got obvious, you see people, I see it now with the training of posturology, like it's obvious. You look at somebody and go, okay, you look at their feet, or you look at the lines in their face, they've got a lower dental lack of dental height. That's a big one that they talk about too in ART, is when they address structural, they tend to go for the bite. And what I've learned through posturology is that's not the first place we want to go, right? Sure, we may need to go there, but that's not the first place we want to go. And so one of the other things we do in ART for structure is we do something called the yin mudra, the structural mudra. So what we can do is, by moving the thumb down, so we use signal enhancers, in case anyone's unfamiliar. And by placing your hand on there near the body, right, we can see specifically where the structural imbalance may be. So if it's, near the top of the pinky finger, then we know it's near the neck. We work our way down. So that's another way we can confirm it. And if that's the case, and I know that structure is a big, big aspect that's blocking this individual from better health, then that's where I just, give them my introduction to posturology and say, hey, let's pause what we're doing and let's start this process, because I think this is the area where I think the most stagnation is. If we can move the needle here, everything else is going to open up and work better, right?
I love how you position all of it. Obviously, a lot of it is through your training. First off, you had really good physiological background in pathology by being a paramedic, and I think it gave you an edge in terms of being able to truly appreciate the depth of Dr. Klinghart's work, in terms of how he presents the different pieces, how he puts them together. Can you give me like an example or two of what's happened with maybe a few of the people you have in mind as soon as you integrated the posturology? People would understand that it helped on a structural level with ailments like shoulder or back pain, but in terms of how it could help you access the other levels of the pyramid, whether it be, as it says here, like the energy body or the mental body, one or two cases, just so people understand like the bigger picture behind doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. So one that comes to mind right now, and we're still early in the process, but it's actually a good friend of mine. Um, he's basically struggled with foot issues since he was a child. So he's born actually. He's from Sri Lanka originally, and he's kind of lived all over the world and was in Australia before he came to Canada, probably in 2021, and then we met. And basically, he's to the point where he has to see a podiatrist and a chiropractor on a pretty much every 2 week or monthly basis, because he has to have corns shaved off the bottom of his feet because of the pain. He gets to the point where he cannot walk, right? So that pain is one of the biggest factors in his life. So we've gone through the ART stuff and found, specific things that we need to work on, but we didn't make a lot of progress. And, I keep coming back to it and telling him, it's the pain. You're in a chronic state of pain, which is keeping you locked in a sympathetic state. So he was hesitant, obviously, right? When you've had something that's gone on since you were, I can't remember exactly, but I would say since he was an early teenager, now he's 35 years old, he's had this condition. So it's very much part of who he is and his psyche. And so he's quite hesitant, but we've started the process. And I mean, the first thing I see is he's got no arches whatsoever, totally flat feet, right? Double valgus ankles. You can see how it's going to affect his knees, his hips, his low back. Um, Definitely shoulders and hips were way off when we first started, obviously. And so his biggest hesitation, right, is he's scared to go to the chiropractor and be judged because he's decided to do something different. But hey, I commend him. He's gone ahead. He's gotten the insoles. We're doing some eye work. There's definitely some neurological imbalance, so we've got to go back and work on the vestibular system. And he still has pain, and that's going to take a long time, I think, for him, because we're talking, over 15 years of this. But what we've noticed already is that he's going back to get the corns, right? These big calluses on the bottom of his feet shaved off way less frequently.
Yeah, it's
Like we're at like 2 months now for him to do that, right? Whereas it was every 2 to 4 weeks that he was doing that. And so to me, that's progress. And I just keep reminding him, like, hey, we've only been doing this for a few months. Wait until we get to a year. Let's see where we're at in a year, right? And make those changes and go from there. So he still struggles because he's got to cancel appointments with the chiropractor now because he doesn't need them as often. And she'll ask what he's doing, and he'll tell her, and then she kind of rolls her eyes and tries to get him back in the orthotics, back into the mold. But yeah, that's the one that comes to mind right now, because we're really, we're making some changes, and it's subtle and it takes time, but we've already seen these changes since, I think it was April or March when we started the process. So what are we now? We're Canada Day tomorrow. So we're three months. So yeah, that's one that jumps out for me.
It's pretty cool to see that what our goal is for people to seek and need less treatment, and so if that's already starting to happen, pain's a funny thing. It's multifactorial, obviously, and I think by taking care of the things we can take care of, we end up contributing to that scenario down the line. And as you pointed out, sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's not, but there's definitely some encouraging signs there. If he already needs to get adjusted less often, he probably already has less stiffness, and so that's a pretty good sign. Um, any obstacles that you had, I guess, to conclude this, so people feel like, okay, I'm not alone in this. When you started integrating, because you were already a practitioner, you were highly skilled in many complementary techniques already. So, in your position, was there anything that you had to learn or get better at, an obstacle that you had to manage in terms of successfully integrating posturology as you did in your practice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. Honestly, I'm going through a transition right now as we speak, where I think because I was an existing practitioner and I already had access to so many clients. I mean, you've seen firsthand how many people I've had kind of get into the system.
Insane.
Um, the issue is, right, is the accountability and keeping people on track, because I was under the mindset that, oh, these are my existing clients, I can trust them to book back in and stick the process. And so I avoided doing the 1 year commitments. And now I see just how valuable that really is. And it's not just for me and for my business and my income, but it's to get them the results they need, right? And so I made the mistake initially of just trying to get so many people in it because I was excited and I wanted to practice on people. And, like so many people in this day and age, we live in the TikTok era, where attention spans and there's so much information. There's so many modalities and things to try. Everybody's got the one thing that's, going to change everything. And so what I found is I was really struggling I was babysitting and chasing people to come back for their follow-ups, like, okay, it's been 6 to 8 weeks. We need new exercises. We need to see where you're at. And it just became too hard because there's too many people to track down. So I'm going through the transition right now, actually, of basically eliminating posturology as just a modality through our clinic and basing the business model now fully on that 1 year contract style commitments. Because I truly believe it's the only way that these people and your clients are going to get success in the program and see the changes.
Yeah, it's always been, I remember forever learning from Dr. Bricot. I mean, it's even on the packaging of the insoles that this is, it's written 10 months, but we know now it might be a bit longer than that for a bunch of reasons, including EMF, actually.
A lot
So,
of reasons.
yeah, there's a few. So, 10 months is kind of the intro. Most people feel comfortable wearing insoles long term because they just keep feeling better as they wear them. And it's such a passive modality that outside of purchasing maybe a pair every 12 to 18 months, it's easy. Easy works nowadays, maybe more than ever. So, but you're right. The results accumulate over time. It's I always refer it to as investing. You can put money in the trade stocks market right now, and you might get lucky and have a really good month, but you might also be unlucky and have a really bad month. And if that gave you a taste and you figured I'm just not going to invest anymore, that's too bad because typically your money would double every 7 years, and that's been the case ever since stock market existed. So essentially, you just got to keep going, right? And if people are told right from the start, your results will accumulate. The first 6 weeks might be a bit challenging, like what you're experiencing with your client, and it might not be like the best of them of all the weeks, but as you keep moving forward, and the more balance you create in the tissues and the structure and the nervous system, the more the body gets used to balance, which maybe it wasn't in the first place, outside of the fact that it was looking for it. The results just keep piling on top of each other. So I agree. I think it's gutsy at the beginning to say to someone, listen, if you want to do this, it's 12 months. And then obviously, people can always back out and they can always ask for, okay, maybe a reimbursement, or like that's okay. Like that's business, that's normal, and we expect a certain number of percentage of people not to follow through on anything. But but the shift I think you're speaking of is the right one, where it's at least presented as a process. And so then you might end up with less people, because I remember seeing orders of yours come in and I was like, does he sleep? Like, holy shit. Like, it was, but at the same time I thought, how, like, I honestly didn't know how you were managing all these people. And obviously by default I figured, you were. And it all works out because some of these people maybe were just never in it for the long term. They probably still benefit from wearing the insoles, to be quite honest with you. And that's they're part of where they're probably still very happy with the outcome, outside of like follow-ups and modifying the exercises. You pointed out to the novelty aspect of the exercises. I think that's key. I think if people are seen in person every 6 weeks, there's that face to face, there's that connection, there's that I'm being managed by a professional. And if they're seen online between in person appointments to review the exercises, if they're too easy, make them more challenging. I think frequency, it doesn't have to be very long appointments, but I think frequency plays a role in keeping people involved, just because it's coaching, right? At the end of the day, and it's like any other form of coaching. The frequency plays a certain role in people following through. So,
Yeah, accountability is the word that comes to mind, right? And so when we leave people to their own devices, like it's not a judgment, but most people in this day and age, it's hard to stay on track with the world we're living in and the stressors that we all have on a day-to-day basis. And so, that was the biggest thing that I saw, right? Is you end up hunting people down if you're kind of doing it on a session by session basis.
yeah,
And most people, they don't notice a whole lot of change in those first few weeks, right? In fact, they can sometimes feel a little bit off.
100%. They could feel worse. Yeah,
Whereas when you go and you get, let's say, an adjustment at the chiropractor or the osteopath, you generally feel better as soon as you step off the table, right? It may not be lasting, but with posturology, you don't get that instant, oh, I feel so much better in my body. That comes with time, and I think that's a big piece when we're talking to people about the long term effect. Is I basically now have come up with like a little bit of an introductory um, write up that I put in all my emails, just to remind people, that it does take time. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for your body to even start to calibrate to those insoles, right? And we want to keep going for a full year. But for those first few weeks, sometimes you might feel a little bit off, but generally around the 6 week mark, you start to notice some sort of improvement in your body. And if we can get to that point, then I know that they're probably going to keep going, right? So I would say it's that
100%.
first 4 to 6 week mark of just reassurance and letting people know, like, hey, it's okay if you feel a little bit off. And I've made that mistake, right? You put a magnet on because it looks good, and then they're texting you or emailing you the next day. Oh, I feel like I'm falling inside. Okay, just take the magnet off, right? Maybe we're not ready for it yet. We'll stick to the insoles. We'll do the eye exercises, and we'll go from there, right? But there's yeah, that's definitely I guess to answer your question, that's the part that I'm really shifting my focus on now, as I see the value in, and even when I did posturology, I paid for a year up front, and I got booked back in, every 6-7 weeks, and that just kept me consistent with the process so that I got those results that I was looking for.
Yeah, it's key, and especially as you see more and more people, you want to make it work for yourself. You want to make it work for them, because outside of volume, there's results, and results brings volume. So, and it's good volume, right? It brings good volume, because it's one thing to see people, but you want to see the people that are getting better, and that's why we're involved in this in the first place. This was pretty
Absolutely.
organic, my friend. This was great.
That was good. It was good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. I know it's going to be helpful. The whole point of this community, as you know, is for people to help other people. Obviously, I take part of that because it's my activity, but I really like the fact that you guys, coming from everyone from different backgrounds and different experiences, can share points of view that I honestly don't have. And if it can help people, there's close to 200 of us now in this group. If it can help people move forward and help more people, we have access to such an incredible tool. I'm just trying to find all of the ways to get people to use it and make it a part of their practice. And you were definitely one of the first ones that came to mind when I thought about launching this podcast, considering just how much you went for it right after your level 2 class. Like you just started like using the system over and over. So I figured, there's a few things these guys can learn from Dylan. So I'm happy you took the time.
I had the unfair advantage that I was already familiar with the system from going through it myself, right? So not everyone's had that experience.
Yeah.
And like I said, that was 2014, 2015. And it's always been kind of in the back of my mind. At some point, I want to pursue this because of what I experienced myself, right? And, I'm so glad I did. So,
It's a
so
good
glad I did.
way. It's a good way of doing it. And I think as practitioners, unless we've tried it ourselves, it's very hard to justify it for others, right? So, I mean, if
Absolutely.
if there's one thing we can leave people with is, if you've learned posturology and you figure you want to do this with people, I think it's an absolute must that you've done it on yourself. Hook up with a practitioner in your neck of the woods, or meet up with one of us online. If you don't have someone near you, it's still going to be a better follow up than no follow up. But yeah, you have to taste the medicine if you want to prescribe it, and this one is without side effects, so it's for once, for
Absolutely.
once. Dylan, have yourself an amazing Tuesday. Thank you so much. And if there's anything, you guys have any questions for Dylan, for myself, don't hesitate. We'll definitely take the time and be there for you.